I mean, it's interesting. Like the crash of 1929 happened after the Fed was created,
and they were implicated in making it worse because they like refused to loan
intervene
to like smaller banks or something. That's what people say. Yeah, I think like
interesting.
You know, it's funny because like that's what you hear, but I feel like that was propagated by like people who like want more of a Fed or something. I think Milton Friedman might have said that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, Friedman conclusion, the Fed had not been created, the downturn of 29 would not have become... Yeah, that's what Milton Friedman said. The Great Depression could have been avoided if the Fed had not so badly botched its monetary policy. That's Milton Friedman's theory. Quite a statement, so... But he's pretty mainstream. People, like, you know, listen to him. I mean, he's kind of on the libertarian side, but definitely on the capitalist side.
Yeah.
But
he was very influential until a little more recently when people have moved away from...
I feel like even Obama was,
down.
like, into him. Like, right? He would, like, read his books.
I forget. He was pretty associated with, like, Republican kind of, you know, from, like, Reagan onwards. But I mean, it is a kind of, like, a weird... opaque, not super accountable system. And yeah, the idea that it is kind of controlled by this like board of governors and these like banks that are constituent members and like not just publicly owned is, I think it is legitimately a fact that would probably like surprise a lot of Americans that it's not an actual government agency. That it's like, why would it be private? This doesn't make any sense. But good luck getting them to change that.
It's like kind of a government. It's like private within the government. Like, you know.
Like Congress almost like deputized it like a fucking sheriff or something to basically handle monetary policy. So it has the power of law via Congress to do things that like and issue things that like directives that you have to follow or you'll go to jail. But it itself, it's like if you like authorize like a private military contractor to be like law enforcement or something, you know, where it's not exactly like run by them, but it's been like deputized and empowered, you know. But this is over something very important, you know, like our monetary policy. And it just that given the people involved, I don't think they're there to like spread the wealth around and like make sure everyone is prosperous. I think they had very different things in mind, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, they've kept the system like humming along, like after 2008, where they almost shut the bed again. But, you know, pumping this free money, kind of devaluing the currency, like it just becomes another tool in kind of the like capitalist elite playbook to kind of keep things within a certain frame without them getting like too much out of hand, and then preventing any more radical like change in the economic system, I guess. I mean, I'm not against exactly the notion of central banks in theory. I just think what we have is like bizarre and frankly a little sus. But then, you know, you go reading more about it and it's like
central bank would be like better. You know, but I'm not like.
I think, like in the Communist Manifesto, Marx kind of called for the establishment of a central bank, which, of course, all these libertarians are like, "See, Karl Marx, he called for a central bank."
Exactly,
like,
it was all his idea.
It's all his fucking idea. Even though, like, all these capitalist economies have fucking central banks too. Like, it's not, you know, it does make sense because otherwise, what are you going to have? You're either going to have like no banks, which doesn't really work, or you're going to have private banks. So, like, it does make sense that. You know, this is more kind of fair and controllable or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, people are saying that this is why Titanic, you know, crashed. Like the people. So you found one of the people, Isidore Straus, who ran Macy's department store. You found an article from 1911 in the New York Times. Isidore Straus urges new banking plan, replies to J.J. Hill's attack on the National Reserve Association scheme. You know, so he's
urging it.
He was recently elected treasurer of the New York branch of the National Citizens League for the promotion of a sound banking system. I mean, that sounds like a lobbying group for the Fed.
I wonder why they like just because he was like a wealthy person who died in the Titanic, like.
Well, this is a couple of the videos, the Q adjacent videos that we saw, and this gets back to kind of our meta discussion about conspiracy theories and people just being like getting increasingly sloppier as we get into the 2020s of like that anthropologist guy doesn't really give much of an explanation, but he's very strongly insists that these millionaires who died on the Titanic were opposed to the creation of the Fed, and that's why J.P. Morgan had to kill them. Now, if they actually were...
While pacing frantically around Santa Monica Pier.
Before he starts talking about giants, that's where he starts. And,
And praising Hitler.
I like, if these three guys, if all of them were vocal opponents of, like, the Federal Reserve, then maybe I'd be like, okay, interesting. Right? It's
if
like
they
when
were
Paul
like
Wellstone's
the biggest
plane
opposition
crashes.
to the Federal Reserve, and they all happened to be on the Titanic, and like, they were like, there was some kind of impasse where it's like these people are preventing it from being achieved somehow. Then that would be sus, at least circumstantially, for sure.
I think the comparison to the Paul Wellstone crash is actually quite like instructive, because in that case, like, that changed the course of American political history. When he died.
Yeah.
Like, it's very obvious. Even people that believe that it was a total freak accident or whatever have to acknowledge that it's an accident that had big consequences for the control of the Senate and et cetera, et cetera. And so with this, it's like, if like all these guys had stood up publicly and were fighting, and like what I'm seeing, reading into a little bit of this history about the Fed, is that it was like there were factions that were against it, but it seems like much more like politicians were the ones that were against it, as opposed to super wealthy business leaders. It seems like most of the business leaders were like pretty much down. What the truthful anthropologist says, I think, by way of explanation, I think this is the furthest he gets into it, is that, well, J.P. Morgan and like the Rothschilds and stuff, they were all like evil bankers. Like, they made their money in finance, but these guys made their money in like real stuff. Like John Jacob Astor, I think the guy who was yelling on that like podcast was going off like, Mr. Ustah was, he made his money off of real estate and the fur trade and inheritance. He wasn't one of these finance guys. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
He was a working class billionaire.
Yeah, he's a working class billionaire. The other it's like Guggenheim made his money off mining. So he's not an evil, finance capitalist. And and the other guy had a department store. So like, he's a real capitalist, like a good capitalist. This is what they believe. And then the finance side of it, just the banking side of it is, evil. That's crony capitalism, or as they often say, it's basically communism. This is like what Karl Marx, like, this is his dream, and they set it up like that all these guys are like brick and mortar working class capitalists. And it's like, I'm seeing zero evidence that basically, and other people have looked, and it's basically, I think with Astor and with Guggenheim, I don't think they had spoken publicly how they felt either way about the Fed. And maybe it's true that because they weren't directly working in finance, that that like they wouldn't be called upon to have like a vocal opinion about it. Like, nobody really, I think, knows what their opinion was, but given their class position, you would almost expect them to be, like, by default, a little bit more for it. And considering these are all their friends, right, that are, as far as we know, they seem to be all pretty chummy and social with one another. And then you have Isidore Straus, the head of Macy's, who did go out there publicly and like worked for a lobbying group in New York and engaged in debates about how we need a Federal Reserve. And then he dies on the Titanic. So I don't think that these guys dying actually had like an effect on the outcome of there being a Federal Reserve, right?
I don't see any reason to think that they were.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the evidence.
The only evidence I see is the evidence that Strauss supported it. That's the only one that I was able to find.
So if anything, they were more into it. And another fact check, just to throw in there as a wrinkle, to sort of attack the idea that J.P. Morgan set these guys up. Apparently, J.P. Morgan canceled his trip on the Titanic like a couple of weeks before it set sail. He didn't cancel it a day before, as everybody claims.
Yeah.
And
although I feel like I don't know why a day before. Like, it's almost like, I forgot I planned to sink the ship to kill the people who are opposed to the Federal Reserve. Better cancel. Like, why would he even make plans to travel on it.
Well, I think because he was going to take back all these antiquities and art with him, and
that's what I heard too. It was
we had brought up
France
that there was
changing its laws to prevent Americans from exporting art treasures from that country. So Morgan went to Paris to oversee getting his purchases out of the country before the new laws went into effect.
Which that does sound like something J.P. Morgan would do.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem too unlikely. I mean, it makes it less suspicious that he would have like taken his. I don't even know if he put his stuff on the boat, like all of his valuable antiquities, and then took it off. He might have just never brought it there because this French law thing came up, and then
yeah, I think he did. I think he did pull a bunch of stuff off the Titanic. But for the fact that J.P. Morgan decided to grant the urgent and oft-repeated request to the directors of the London Fine Arts Society and permit his... I'm scrolling over in this old newspaper. Again, trying to find it. Pitts' bronzes to be placed upon view during the spring exhibition. His entire collection will be at the bottom of the sea today. If the request of the Fine Arts Society had been refused, the bronzes, according to Mr. Morgan's original plan, would have been ready for transportation to this country on the doomed vessel, it was said today. There were 1,400 tons of small bits of cargo on board. So, yeah, apparently he did have bronzes on there, but then I guess there was an urgent request from the directors of the London Fine Arts Society to permit his bronzes to be placed upon view during the spring exhibition. So, I don't know, maybe this was a London Fine Arts Society conspiracy, and they, just wanted to get that art off of the ship. I don't know, but apparently he did take it off. But that seems to be independent from him canceling his voyage, which either was because of that, or some people say because of his mistress. Those are the two theories.
He was hanging out with his mistress, which also totally tracks.
I mean, I wouldn't rule out necessarily that aside from being a plan, a plan to crash it, I wouldn't be if there was some flaw in the Titanic that caused it to be susceptible to that. Which, I mean, it also seems like it was partially human error and aspects of that were involved. But if maybe there was something that caused him to doubt the Titanic, or he got a bad vibe, he was talking to somebody at White Star or something like that, then and then he was like, I'm just not gonna take this. I'm gonna stay here in France with my mistress. That could be, I don't know. I could see him getting sussed out by the ship. Maybe, yeah. I mean,
maybe he felt its awesome, terrible spiritual power and, sent something.
Yeah. I mean, there are things like that with 9/11 too, what's his name?
Seth MacFarlane,
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
there's weird shit.
9/11, was he involved?
There's just that earlier article said, there were those two brothers, I think they were going to work on the Titanic, that were getting drunk and missed it, and the grapes saved them. And so, there could be just something in the air, some vibes going down that just compelled people.
You know who else missed it? Milton S. Hershey, right? So he was a brick and mortar capitalist. He made his money from caramel and molasses. King. He wasn't one of these finance guys, all right? So why was he not, made to, maybe he just avoided it on his own. Maybe he caught on it.
Who knows? I'm looking at this Isidor
A.G.
Strauss.
Vanderbilt also was gonna take it, but then he canceled it, only to die later on the Lusitania. That's crazy.
That's weird.
Yeah.
One of the Vanderbilts was a member of Jekyll Island, but I mean, most of the famous bourgeoisie.
Oh yeah, the club there. There was a lot.
The club there. It was kind of almost like a southern Bohemian Grove kind of vibe, a little bit. It sounded like. Or if you believe these libertarian guys, literally a giant sacrifice site that they built their lodge over and then consecrated a deal with Satan to create the Fed. Which, I mean, in a broad sense, I'm not saying they didn't do that in a way. They didn't make some kind of sinister alchemical pact to control our money.
They already
and
made a deal with Satan when they became millionaire industrialists and capitalists and bankers. That had already been,
It doesn't feel like they needed to also sacrifice a child to consecrate. In order for the Fed to be evil and a bad idea, they didn't need to sacrifice children when they signed it.
I don't think the child sacrifice story has any
I don't really know where it came from. He just starts talking about it.
Well, I mean, why not, right? I mean, if you're already doing Hitler apologism and you're already talking about giants and stuff, why not have the Fed sacrifice a baby too? I don't know.
Of course.
I don't know.
It is a little. I have a strong stomach for this stuff, but sometimes it gets a little. When I see people on like YouTube shows with like huge followings that are like not that politically up on. They're just kind of rolling with the punches, and they get some of these guys on.
I try not to think about like some of the people who like have. I mean, even outside of like that, like there's people who like are. I'm sorry to say it, but like functionally illiterate, like and that, but who are millionaires, have no reason to be functionally illiterate, who just get like paid so much, who have made their millions just scrolling Twitter, and like remarking on it or like playing video games. It's crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's an environment that's rife for that type. And then like, obviously like they're like a social stigma, like attaches itself to like talking about these topics or even things that are just like adjacent or superficially similar. For instance, like, it's interesting, like how much like the occult has like been influential in like the ideologies of like the, this group of elite people like in the United States, like in this particular way, something like that, like a very nuanced thing. Like it's interesting how like this is like this group of people were so, or like how popular spiritualism was like among some of the rich people who traveled in the Titanic or something like that. Then it's like, oh, are you saying they sacrificed a baby on Jekyll Island? Like then it's like, all right,
well, yeah. It triggers the immune system of the Lords and like the normies, sort of like people that are sort of more within like the establishment, part of the Venn diagram, to associate you with, and
it's not even say that like again, like people are like, oh, it's not materialistic or something. I mean, I'm just going into like a whole different polemic, but it's like, for like to talk about something like that. It's about how like the material character of the people who participate in these practices and who hold these beliefs shapes those beliefs, and then those beliefs like are shaped in turn, right? And then how those beliefs then, when they proliferate, like have that character impressed upon them, how these two things interact, right? And also like how practices are encoded in that, and how those things like affect and constitute like realities and like forms of relation between people. So like, but when we talk about like the ideology or like even some of the esoteric views of like powerful people or certain subcultures or things like that, or I think that is interesting or valuable to talk about in a way that is like very, very different from making up like spooky stories about like what the Jews did on the island to create the Fed, like
yeah, exactly.
And I don't think that those two things should be associated. And yes, I see how it is like upsetting that like they would be at all. I think that talking about like these aspects of the Titanic, like the even like this problem of like the planning versus the randomness, or the religious dimension of how it was discoursed after the fact, or how it was understood, before the fact, or the ideas of the people that were on it, like, and the way I think it's fascinating how like William T. Stead, wrote about this possibility, someone who had, spiritualist views and who had sort of thought that he would like had said previously, like, I'm going to either die by drowning or by being, like killed by a mob. And, wow. How different people with occult interest, Hauptmann certainly had written sort of stories about this, a tragedy like this. I think that's, very interesting from a cultural perspective, and from like a perspective of like, the stories or like the myths and in fact the practices that are informed by those things. So this beliefs and practices always, I feel like, go together, and, modes of life and things like that are, things, sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word, but like, just the social fabric and the constitution of, a society. Those things always go hand in hand with, like, it's not like, beliefs are just like idealistic. In fact, they have a certain materiality to them, like through practice and through enactment. But I mean, this is maybe a bit of a digression, but, I find those things to be interesting to consider, but I don't think that is the same as like saying, like, I don't know. Yeah. Like saying that JP Morgan did it like the iceberg was actually a giant that was standing on the seafloor, and like it bumped into his hunchback, and that's why it sank. And J.P. Morgan had it moved to like, you know, position itself to kill the people who like quote unquote supported the Fed when they didn't. Like, I don't know. That's
just the annoying thing to me is when there's something that just like you could easily look it up in 2 seconds.
Literally, and like I bet like after this episode airs, like on Reddit, like people are gonna say like subliminal jihad literally said the Titanic was switched with the Olympic. Like, you know, like that's probably gonna like that's like literally what happens.
Literally will. Yeah.
And they summoned demons on an island and it was giants. Like, you know, like
well, you know, talking about something is endorsing it.
Yes, exactly. So, talking about is endorsing, describing is endorsing it, etc. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or condemning it if it's Satanism, which is beyond the pale, how dare you, etc.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.
Tell me quick, said old McPhee, what's this all have to do with me? I spent all my time at sea, alone now. Is there something else I should know? Something hidden down below the level of your conversation? Well, it turned away before the answer. Though I yelled aloud, he refused to hear. Became too clear. So it went as we put out. I was left in constant doubt. Everything I asked about seemed private. The captain strolled the bridge one night. Stopped him in the evening light to ask him would it be alright to join him. Well, he stood there like some idol, and he listened like some temple, and then he turned away. Coast, we moved silent like a ghost. The timeless sea of tireless host possessed us. The wind came building from the cold northwest, and soon the waves began to crest, crashing across the forward deck, all hands lost. I alone survived the sinking.